Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Despite a series of increasingly restrictive sanctions on Russia since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, EU countries imported more liquefied natural gas, or LNG, from Russia than from the United States in the second quarter of 2024, according to data from the Brussels think tank Bruegel. In fact, Russia's revenue from mineral fuel exports has remained comparable to 2019 levels. This is largely due to a shift in oil exports towards China, India, and Turkey. How is this happening, and does this challenge the whole idea of imposing sanctions as a means of punishment? To discuss this and related topics, I'm joined by Michał Matlak, Policy Advisor, European Parliament. Mr. Matlak, welcome to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So it's a pleasure. So how is this happening? I mean, you know, the EU's buying more than before the sanctions are imposed. Doesn't make sense to me.
It makes sense in general. So the sanctions introduced after the full-scale invasion really changed the way the EU is buying its energy. It's buying much less from Russia, but it's complicated and it's difficult. Obviously, without certain kinds of facilities like Nord Stream, the natural alternative seems to be the LNG. And it's true that in May, Russia was the biggest exporter of LNG to Europe, so bigger than the US. But it was it happened because of some infrastructure problems in the US, and we bought, so the EU bought, and the EU countries bought 15% of LNG gas from Russia, and 14% were from the US. So the difference is not big, and it's because infrastructural problems in the US. I think that from what I understand, the experts say that it will go back to the situation where the US will be still the biggest seller soon. And I'd say that in general, the sanctions are working, including the sanctions on energy, but it's true that it's very difficult to get rid completely of Russian gas, especially the LNG, because it's now the alternative, and this is why it's complicated. It's complicated, especially for some countries who have long-term contracts, who have companies that are still involved in the projects in Russia. That's the case of France, for example. That's why it's quite on top of the list. It's very complicated. It's very difficult, but I'd say it's working.
Well, okay. I mean, that was actually going to be my next question. You say it's complicated, but some countries in the EU have managed to do it. I mean, the top three importers in the EU of LNG from Russia are France, Spain and the Netherlands. I think we've got a slide which shows those numbers. Now, you know, what is it that the other countries can do, but these three countries can't?
It's just it's often the question of contracts. Sometimes it's more difficult to end them. Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes more difficult. Of course, it's a question of political will sometimes as well. It's the question of the energy mix of a given country. So the questions, I mean, the reasons are often quite complicated. As we know, also the countries who cut it completely are in Central and Eastern Europe. So those who are very much politically opposed to Russian imperialism, that definitely played a role. It's not the only reason why it worked well in Central and Eastern Europe, but it's one of the reasons. I don't know if you want to ask about the sanctions, the kind of the new set of sanctions imposed by the EU. There was a set of sanctions, the 14th set, and it was yet another move to impose sanctions on LNG. It forbade these sanctions forbade to import the Russian LNG and export it outside of Europe, which will mean in practice that Russia will get less money for it, and it will be more complicated for them to sell their LNG. So I'd say it's working, but much slower than we would want it to work.
Well, certainly it is much slower than we would like. But you see, the thing is, I mean, there are a number of issues that this raises. One of them, of course, is that LNG is transported in pipelines or on ships, and those are vulnerable. You don't know what else is on those ships that are leaving Russia. On top of which, of course, you know, the income, the revenue that Russia earns from mineral fuels has stayed pretty constant since, you know, even before the sanctions. So, yeah, I mean, it does beg the question: can sanctions work if you've got an organisation, a transnational organisation like the EU, which requires so many countries to work together, imposing them? Can they work?
They can work, and they do work. The EU is importing much less energy from Russia, and is much less dependent from Russia than it was before 2022. That's clear. We could discuss the previous period from 2014 until 2022, but the last years is in general a success. I'd say it's kind of a relative success, not a great success, but it's still working. The reason why the Russian economy and the exports didn't collapse completely are partially in Europe, but not really here. It's just they managed to export their energy to Asia, to India, to China. There are also some limitations over there. There are also difficult negotiations, especially with China, going on. But in general, that's what these are the countries who decided to make use of the situation and buy a cheap Russian energy, and that's the main reason why Russian revenues are still relatively high.
Yes, I mean, we see now on the screen the leap, if you like, in purchases of LNG in 2024 in the first half, and it is perhaps somewhat disheartening. I mean, I do understand what you're saying about, you know, the sanctions working, but on the face of it, Mr. Matlak, it doesn't seem that, you know, that way. So the other thing that, of course, is surprising is that this leap, you know, or this surge appeared in the summer, when you'd have thought there'd be less demand for gas than in the winter, say.
Yes, that's true. But this is because of something that will not repeat itself, I hope. So first of all, there were significant problems with the infrastructure in the US, the LNG infrastructure in the US. That's why they sold less. And then in winter, there is the question of the kind of the fact that it's easier to export the LNG from the Arctic. So that's the main source of the Russian LNG. This will not happen next year. I'm certain that the price will be lower, and that's the problem. They will still be relatively high for the 2, 3, 4 years to come. I'm very afraid of that.
All right. Well, of course, we shall be watching it, and we look forward to hearing your analysis as time goes by. Thank you very much for taking the time, Mr. Matlak.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day. Bye.
And you too.
And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye for now.